Thanks everybody for joining room one, and thanks Danielle for coming to present. We have Danielle Gerlach, CAC AmeriCorps alum and urban planner, and she is going to talk about navigating green jobs and urban planning. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it on to Danielle.
Hey all, thank you for this opportunity. I'm really excited. I'm going to go ahead and share. I do not have a fancy moving presentation that the others had. That was really cool. But can you see my screen? Awesome. Okay. So as Celie already said, I'm Danielle. I am an AmeriCorps alum. I served in 2017 to 2018, right after I graduated college. And I just want to talk to you today about green jobs and urban planning, obviously. And urban planning is kind of a multifaceted career choice that you can have. It's a interesting career choice to find different ways to combine different things you care about. So that's kind of how I got into it. So some more information about me. I am from Michigan. I went to Michigan State, and I was originally in the business college there. I was going to be focusing on supply chain management and sustainability. But turns out I don't care about the bottom line enough to be very successful in the business school. So at the time, I was working as a student assistant for the Michigan Department of Transportation. And I started asking around and found out that they were all urban planners and that they all worked in a different environmental facet of urban planning. So there's like noise, there's invasive species, there's water management, there's even like environmental justice. And I go more into detail about that later. So after I talked to them about it, I took an introductory class and I learned more about urban planning and what I could do with that. And it really solidified my want to go into it. And it was a great way to kind of combine my passion about the environment, my passion about service, and my passion about working for people to find a career in that. And so coming to 2017, I was graduating. Urban planning is a field that a lot of places want to see a master's degree or experience, as a lot of other places. And so I knew I wanted to do something service oriented. Peace Corps was on my list, but the idea of being abroad for 2 years and kind of like we were learning earlier about the whole white savior complex that sometimes comes with it, it wasn't my top choice. So I literally Googled programs similar to Peace Corps and AmeriCorps came up. So I researched based on the different programs and I found CAC AmeriCorps, and I think I applied to maybe like 5 different CAC positions. I was really excited about it. And I was able to meet with Ariel and I knew that was what I wanted to do. So enter CAC AmeriCorps. Moved from Michigan down to Knoxville, which was a great decision. I loved it. I specifically served with the city of Oak Ridge as a water quality technician. So my background in urban planning was really useful because I have mapping skills. I knew about stormwater management from my environmental planning classes. And I had some other skill sets that were useful for my service here. So in this position, I measured water quality and conducted inspections with my teammate, Jessica. And that involved a lot of falling in creeks, tripping over logs, emptying wet waders, trudging through creeks behind people's houses. It was great. And we recorded outfalls, found illicit discharge, and really helped the city compile a stormwater outfall geodatabase so that they could keep track of where illicit discharge is coming from, keep track of the changes over time to if there was anything that needed to be rebuilt or if something happened between the inspections. In addition to that, we also got to work with multiple organizations, and that include Keep Anderson County Beautiful. And that was really fun. They don't have an AmeriCorps member, or didn't when I was there, like Keep Sevier Beautiful or Keep Knoxville Beautiful. So we kind of double teamed it and helped them with their events and things like that. One of the biggest things that Jessica and I did was to teach at the Oak Ridge High School. And we were there in different classes. We taught at just a generalized STEM introductory course. And we also taught in an AP environmental class, which was really cool. And it was just really interesting because for me, teaching wasn't really something that I was looking into. And environmental science was something that like I knew about and I had some knowledge, but not enough to really think about going out and teaching others. So it was a great learning opportunity, and it was fantastic to partner with the school. And we even with the AP environmental class got to go out. They have a stormwater detention pond on site, and so we were able to go out and dig up benthics and actually like do the activities. And we did a lot of labs. So it was really hands-on. It was really awesome. And it got the kids really excited. Two other things that Jess and I introduced were Clean the Clinch and Wise Water Wednesday. So Clean the Clinch was just an event on a Saturday morning to get the community members out there on the Clinch River to pick up trash that had gathered along the riverbanks and floating in the water. It was a great success, and they redid it this year. I was so excited to see that. So I'm happy about that. And then Wise Water Wednesday was an activity in the afternoons on Wednesdays at the local library. It was geared towards younger children, and it was very basic water science. But we actually had a lot of people repeat, come back, and they knew us at the library and in the community. So that was really cool because Oak Ridge is really not that large. And so actually with Oak Ridge not being that large, Jessica and I were able to go to the Tennessee Conference on Volunteering and Service Learning and talk about how we were promoting engagement in a small municipality, because sometimes it can be a lot harder to get people out and participating. And then something else that was a big highlight was the Public Works Week. We went to some after school programs dressed up as superheroes for each of the divisions of the Public Works Department. And we were the Stormwater Renegades. So those pictures, a photo of a poster that a student drew of me in my cape as a Stormwater Renegade. And it was just a really fun way to get kids learning about public works and what they could potentially do in their future, depending on what they were interested in. And we were definitely a crowd pleaser because we brought in our benthics in these little jars. And so of course the kids were fascinated. So yeah, CUC was great. So just looking back, the first picture is the group of friends that I really got close with. It was everybody that lived on Richmond Ave. We were all in a row. And just like Josh was saying in his presentation, I have met in my AmeriCorps experience people that will be lifelong friends. And I'm so grateful for that. I've been able to travel and see them and learn from them. And they have just really enriched my life and changed it, honestly. And RIP Earth Fest, I didn't know that that wasn't happening. That's the picture on the other side is I was sitting on those letters after volunteering at Earth Fest. So CAC was like one of the best decisions that I've ever made was to join that. And so using that experience, what I did afterwards was I actually moved to Indianapolis to be in AmeriCorps Vista with the Indy's Promise Zone. And I ended up staying in Indy for a couple of years and went to graduate school, started graduate school. And that's where I used my education award. So make sure you find, if you're continuing your education, find a school that will match it, at least. A lot of programs actually will provide even more for AmeriCorps alum. I know the philanthropy program at IUPUI would do a full ride if you were an AmeriCorps alum. So what I was studying was public administration. I was more interested in the policy implementation side, but I actually didn't finish school or my grad school. So, but I became a planner with the MPO, and an MPO is a metropolitan planning organization. It just is a regional planning organization that is required to receive federal funding. And it was the first step for me to take in order to find the connection between transportation and the environment in my own career. So fast forward to now, I'm back home in Michigan and I'm a planner with a company called HNTB. It started as an engineering company, but now it is everything from planning, design, engineering to actually building it. So we really see a lot of projects from start to finish. And as a planner at HNTB, my specific group does a lot of environmental analysis, and that includes a lot of GIS mapping work. And that's kind of what I've become a specialist in, sort of. And so this example map shows something that I did. And so the outlined road project is a potential project in the future. And so what we do is we look and see the different icons represent different types of contamination that the construction people will need to know about, and they'll have to plan around it. We'll have to mitigate the impacts on those streams and drains. I also look at historic properties, and there's a lot of coordination that goes on with this. And as a consulting firm, we do a lot of work with like MDOT, the Department of Transportation. And so we have to coordinate not only with MDOT, but with the federal agencies, the local agencies, as well as like the EPA, the Department of Environmental Quality, and things like that, to make sure that our construction projects are meeting all of the guidelines. And a lot of those are set out through federal regulation, and it's required in most of these projects. And so it's definitely a field that is continuing to grow. And it's kind of an unconventional way, I guess, to be an environmentalist instead of going into like an actual science or direct conservation and preservation position. And, you know, with transportation, it's, you know, I don't know how many of you will follow the administration, but, you know, there was a big infrastructure bill that passed, and equity was a big part of it. And so that funding is going to be something that my company will be directly working with, like MDOT and other organizations, to work on those projects. So more specifically, transportation and infrastructure planning related to the environment. Like I said, there's a lot of those federal, state, and local regulations that make a lot of this work required. And a lot of that requires documentation to show that we did these analyses, that the impacts that may happen are going to be mitigated, or this is the plan to avoid it, you know, whatever the action may be. And some of those examples include environmental impact statements, which those are really big documents that have a lot of environmental impacts. So those usually have noise analysis, air quality, invasive species, native species, as well as looking at the community that lives around where the project may be. So those are pretty lengthy. Then there's also environmental assessments. Those are kind of like the impact statement, but light. And then what we call for short FONSIs, finding of no significant impact. And so those are documents that are just for projects that are, well, there's going to be no significant impact. They're a lot easier. So like I said, HNTB plans, designs, and constructs a lot of transportation projects, but for the environmental focus, I like to talk about the transit and alternative modes of transportation specifically. So, you know, CO2 emissions and, you know, other air quality issues that come from transportation are a huge issue. And so finding those alternative modes of transportation is a really great way to get people out of their cars and, you know, on a train, on a bike, walking, things like that. And also just providing those choices are a great way to improve equity for the community as well. And not only does transportation need stuff like this now, but the future of transportation is so vast. I mean, we've got autonomous vehicles and bus rapid transit systems. Equity, like I said, is now a huge focus at the federal level, which is very new, especially with putting money behind it. And also with that focus is there's a big movement to try and repair past issues that were caused by poor transportation planning decisions before. So when the Highway Act passed and we started developing all of these interstates, NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, that wasn't implemented yet. So they didn't have to think about water sources nearby and the types of pollution that might impact it, or filling in wetlands and what that might do to drainage in the future, or how it might impact a certain community more or less than other communities. And so all of these things, planners kind of take all of this into consideration and write these really big documents to try and educate the decision makers, and also provide a means to have different choices to choose from to find what would be best for that community, which will meet the purpose and need of the project, which those are all defined very specifically in the beginning. And it's kind of like a hierarchy decision process. Something that I would like to specifically call out is the environmental justice part, because for me, environmental justice was the kind of nail in the coffin for my decision to pursue urban planning. So transportation planning has a very racist past. Redlining was a practice done by banks and housing organizations where they would rate places to provide mortgages, and if it was red, it was less desirable or not desirable, and those places tended to be more of the minority populations or low income populations, and it caused a lot of the housing segregation that we're still seeing today. This is very, very much a prominent issue that is going to take decades to kind of rectify and even start to kind of move the scale back. But not only did we segregate them, these populations like that, but then when we put in these highways, and you can see it on this map of Indianapolis, we chose to put the highways directly through those redlined communities. So those highways decimated flourishing populations and neighborhoods of Black and brown communities, of lower income communities, and in Indianapolis specifically, the Indiana Avenue area was completely demolished, and that was like the epicenter of the Black culture there, which is very large in Indianapolis, and it's gone, and it's still. And so it's just really hard to kind of repair those past damages. But we can't go and change the past, so that's what we're trying to do. And so for an example, HNTB is working on a planning and environmental linkages document. And what we're doing is we're looking at the potential options of taking out 475 highway, which is in Flint, Michigan. And it was originally implemented for Buick when the big, not warehouse, I'm sorry, when the big factory was there. And it was supposed to spur economic development and provide all of these new opportunities for the people that lived in Flint. And what it did was it displaced a lot of those people. It separated the communities by putting a giant limited access freeway through it. And all of the economic development that was supposedly supposed to come with that never came to fruition. In fact, it was a big detriment to Flint, and still today it is impacting Flint. And so what we're doing is we're doing a study to see what the viable options are to take that out and replace it either with a boulevard or which would be something like 2 lanes on either side with a median in the middle, with beautification aspects in the middle, so like street trees or public art, things like that. And we're also looking at ways to intentionally reconnect those communities and intentionally provide opportunities for further economic development and opportunities for the people that are still in Flint. And that's the other thing, is it's caused a decline in population because the quality of life has therefore declined from the implementation of the highway. And so it's kind of this really long story of a domino effect of these transportation decisions being made at one point, and how it impacts so many different other facets of life, and how it impacts certain communities a lot more than others, especially negatively. And that's what the negative externalities is externalities are impacts that are felt due to a project. So I guess more specifically, putting in the highway produced more noise and air pollution. And that's a negative externality because the people that are living around it suffer those consequences, even though the benefit of the road is there for everybody to travel on. And lastly, regarding environmental justice is gentrification. So when we are implementing good transportation projects like a bus rapid transit route, a lot of times property values will increase because it's an improved quality of life. Transit is proven to increase property values within its surrounding area, especially for things like bus rapid transit. And what that does is a lot of times when the land is bought for these projects, they want to do it very cheap. And so where the land is lower, it tends to be a lower income area. And they buy those people out, cause the the surrounding properties value to increase. And then the people that are living there can no longer afford it. And so they're forced to leave. And that's called gentrification. And so it basically is trying to improve a community without any regard for providing opportunities for the people that are already there to stay, or at least have an equal opportunity to choose where they want to go later. And so kind of going back to the 475 example, when they were buying the properties from the people that were living there, there's a long, very documented process that they undervalued the properties, especially if it was a Black or a brown person that owned it. White properties that were vacant were priced at the same as a property that was owned by a Black family that had a house on it. And so things like that nature that ruin generational wealth and have all these other impacts that continue going on are all part of the environmental justice movement. And so that is a huge thing that I'm focused on personally. Especially because the communities have been forced to suffer from these decisions and they don't have to. So beyond just transportation, urban planning is a very big picture career path, I guess. There are so many different facets to it, and that's kind of what really drew me to it in the first place. With an urban planning degree or experience, you can go into policy, you can go into zoning and land use specifically. You can focus on housing, you can focus on food systems, community development, or economic development. And the thing about urban planning, though, is all of these things are interrelated. So policy decisions impact transportation, impact zoning, impact housing, and vice versa. And so as an urban planner, looking at the bigger picture and coordinating with others and creating these documents basically are about providing that bigger picture so that the decision makers have all of the information that they need to make the best decision for their community. So while I focused on transportation because that is the most direct, obvious, and I'm not sure, it's tangible to me for urban planning, which is why I pursued transportation. But there are so many different options out there. So that being said, I wanted to leave a lot of time to talk because I don't know if you have questions about my AmeriCorps experience, urban planning, or anything like that, but I'm happy to answer them, and feel free to get a hold of me afterwards as well with any of the ways that are on the screen.
Thanks, Danielle. That was great. I really appreciate that perspective, and also, taking time to acknowledge the social justice issue. I didn't really ever know that about urban planning until this year, and you elaborated on that further. So I hope that helps some members think outside the box for opportunities after AmeriCorps. So thanks for that. If y'all want to drop any questions in the chat, or if you have questions later, you can shoot them to me and I'll get them to Danielle. And if you have any questions now, feel free to ask her because we have until 3:15.
Danielle, something that struck me about your talk was federal and state mandates that require planning programs, things like that, right? And that's something that I realized when I started working in stormwater, that my job existed because it had to exist, you know, it isn't always necessarily the top priority of the community or the community leadership that you have an environmental program or that you have a social justice program. So these requirements establish a baseline, and from there you kind of really have to figure out how to make what you do fit and add value to your community from that basis. And sometimes, you know, it can be real frustrating to run up against walls that at times are like, you know, we have your program because we have to. Stop costing us more money or proposing things that cost us more money. But at the same time, when you build those relationships with your community, at times, maybe you originally started out in a space where it's like you're here because you have to be. But sometimes once you can build that relationship and that community buy-in and help people find kind of their own reasons for valuing what you do, you know, sometimes then really amazing things that go beyond you are here for a compliance purpose happen. Yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. That was just something that stood out. Also, the piece about the Clean the Clinch and seeing that that's happening again, it is really reaffirming to see things that you contributed to during your service year still there. I went back to Florida years ago where I served my second year, and there were some signs that I had made while I was there, and I was like, those are probably gone, but they were still there. And I was like, how about that? So.